Welcome back, scandal-hungry viewers. Today, we're diving into a topic stickier than a politician's promise: corruption. Specifically, the top 10 most corrupt countries in 2024. We're talking about economies bled dry, human rights trampled, and a brazenness that would make even the most morally flexible accountant blush. We'll throw some shocking numbers your way, like how much money gets siphoned off through shady dealings. So, grab your hazmat suits and let's get our hands dirty.
Venezuela, a textbook case in how to wreck your economy through corruption. Hard data like the Corruption Perception Index and Bribery Probability Index. Venezuela is practically failing out of corruption school. In Venezuela, a bribe isn't just a possibility, it's practically a requirement. The ripple effects are devastating: plummeting GDP, sky-high inflation. Venezuela is a cautionary tale of how unchecked corruption can bring a nation to its knees. Next up, North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom. Getting accurate information out of North Korea is nearly impossible. In a system where power is absolute, corruption is the system. No independent media, no free elections, no rule of law. The Kim dynasty lives lavishly while millions struggle. North Korea is where transparency goes to die. Yemen, a country ravaged by conflict and instability. Corruption festers like a wound that never heals. Aid money is diverted, enriching a corrupt elite. Humanitarian aid is stolen and sold on the black market. Conflict fuels corruption, worsening the suffering. Corruption deepens the wounds of war, hindering peace. Our journey now takes us to Afghanistan, a country struggling to build a future free from corruption. Afghanistan's history is marked by conflict, instability, and foreign intervention. When a country is ravaged by conflict, institutions crumble and accountability becomes scarce. In that vacuum of power, corruption flourishes like weeds in an untended garden. The Afghan people deserve a government that serves their needs, not the greed of a corrupt few. They deserve a future where their children can thrive, not just survive. The international community has a responsibility to support Afghanistan in its fight against corruption. A stable and prosperous Afghanistan is in everyone's best interest. That can only be achieved if corruption is eradicated from its roots. Our next stop is Syria, a country synonymous with unimaginable suffering. Syria has been ravaged by a brutal civil war, leaving its people displaced and its economy in ruins. Corruption, my friends, is a parasitic force that feeds on chaos and instability. In Syria, corruption has become deeply entrenched in every level of society. The war has created a breeding ground for war profiteering, where corrupt individuals exploit the conflict for personal gain. This corruption hinders any hope for a swift and sustainable recovery. It undermines humanitarian efforts, erodes trust in governance, and perpetuates the cycle of suffering. Syria's recent history is defined by corruption and conflict. Our Corruption Express is now pulling into Libya, a nation synonymous with political instability. After decades of authoritarian rule, Libya had a brief moment of hope for a democratic future. But that hope evaporated as the country plunged into chaos and civil war. In this chaotic landscape, corruption has flourished like a cactus in the Sahara. It's infiltrated every level of government, from local municipalities to the highest echelons of power. Rampant bribery, embezzlement of public funds, and a blatant disregard for transparency and accountability. The consequences are devastating. A crippled economy, discouraged foreign investment, and fueled instability. Libya is a stark reminder that political instability and corruption go hand in hand. Equatorial Guinea, where oil and corruption mix. Equatorial Guinea is swimming in oil, but this wealth has become a curse, fueling corruption and inequality. The wealth is concentrated in the hands of a tiny elite, headed by a president in power for over 4 decades. Transparency and accountability aren't top priorities. The oil industry is shrouded in secrecy, with little oversight. Corrupt officials gorge on oil wealth while the population struggles. Equatorial Guinea is a textbook example of the resource curse. Our corruption ship sails into Somalia, a nation ravaged by conflict and lack of governance. The line between officials, warlords, and pirates is blurred. Corruption flourishes like algae in a stagnant pond. Bribery is a way of life. Pirates are a symptom of a failed state. Somalia's story is a tragic cautionary tale. Our corruption caravan is rolling into South Sudan, a nation still wet behind the ears when it comes to independence. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, burst onto the scene in 2011, full of hope and promise. But South Sudan's dreams quickly crumbled under the weight of corruption, mismanagement, and renewed violence. Gaining independence is one thing. Building a functioning state from scratch is a whole different ballgame. Corruption, which had been simmering beneath the surface, exploded into the open. Billions of dollars in oil revenue disappeared, pocketed by corrupt officials and their cronies. Essential services like healthcare and education were starved of funds. This rampant corruption fueled a brutal civil war, plunging the country back into chaos and despair. Our final destination is Burundi, a small, landlocked nation in East Africa grappling with poverty and corruption. Burundi is one of the poorest countries on the planet. Corruption acts like a parasite, keeping its people trapped in poverty. For many, corruption is a matter of life and death. But there's hope. Efforts to combat corruption are ongoing. Small victories can have a ripple effect.
Well, folks, there you have it. A whirlwind tour through the top 10 most corrupt countries in the world. Corruption isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about real lives impacted by greed and abuse of power. We're talking about trillions of dollars siphoned off annually. Money that could lift people out of poverty and improve education and healthcare. But don't despair. The fight against corruption is far from over. Brave journalists, activists, and everyday citizens are refusing to accept corruption as the status quo. Let's keep the pressure on, demand better from our leaders, and work together to create a world where corruption is not just condemned, it's eradicated.